Pink subjects can be so captivating. They're bright and vibrant, and sometimes they feel like they don't even belong in their setting, like a flamingo or some really bright, vibrant pink flowers. But sometimes rendering these objects in colored pencil can be really tricky. In this video, I am going to draw these pink flowers, and as I do, I'm going to share the top 10 mistakes artists make when they're drawing pink objects. Ready? Let's go. I have been seeing this mistake a lot lately, and that is having sloppy line work. Sometimes sloppy lines are just lines that are created too quickly, where the artist isn't carefully studying their subject or their reference photo, and instead is oversimplifying the details. This can become a problem if your goal is to have a highly realistic drawing. You want to start off with a really tight, really crisp line drawing. Another way that line work can get really sloppy is having dull pencils. You want your pencils razor sharp so that you can get really precise and so that you have control over the line quality and the weight of the line that you're using. Here I'm using my LIGHTFAST colored pencils, and I love using these for line work because they come to a razor sharp point. A third way that your line work can get sloppy is by simply picking the wrong color for your line work. Here I'm working on a pink subject matter, so I want to pick colors that show up in my photo reference. Pinks, reds, and even purples. If I started out with a graphite pencil, I run the risk of smudging that graphite into my color and contaminating my pure, clean color. And similarly, if I started with a black colored pencil or a really dark colored pencil, I might have those same smudging issues, and I also might have an issue of having too much of my viewer's attention focused on the outlines. I want the outlines there at the beginning so that I know where the shapes are and how the composition is working together, but I don't want these outlines to be a predominant part of the piece. I want them to get absorbed into the drawing and become part of it, and that can be really difficult to do if I'm using colors that don't show up in my reference photo. Mistake number 2 is carelessly selecting your initial colors. So this subject is pink, yes, but look at how many different kinds of pink there are. And there's tons of other colors too. Here I'm using a program called Procreate that I use on my iPad. I plug the photo in and I'm able to match the color, then swatch them over to the side so that I can actually see them out of the context of the flower. And this can help me pick out my colored pencils before I even begin. If you don't have Procreate, you can use free apps on your phone like Arty for iPhones and Colored Pencil Picker or something like that for Androids. These can be a great way to just take some intentional time to analyze the color and to pick out your colored pencils before you ever get started. Mistake number 3 is not building your subject up in layers. When you're working with pink, it's possible that you might have the exact right pink for a particular part in your drawing, but what's more likely is that you have a pink colored pencil that is close to the pink that you're rendering. And when you mix that with some of your other pinks or purples or possibly even reds and oranges, you're able to actually get that color to match. So as you begin working on your pink subject matter, start with a colored pencil that is as close as possible to the area that you're working on. Then adjust and adapt it and nudge it with your colored pencils. If you're working in light layers, you're going to be able to have a lot of control on which way the color goes. But if you come in with a ton of pressure on your very first layer, you're not going to have as many options for adjusting and modulating the color. Another reason it's a good idea to layer is it gives you more of an opportunity to study your subject before you make commitments that you can't back away from. So I actually consider the line drawing to be my first layer. It's my first opportunity to really dive in and study my subject in a close, personal way. Then I come in with my initial color impression. So that is this stage in the drawing right now, where I am using a variety of colored pencils to get my color as close as possible without over analyzing it or getting too stuck in teeny tiny little details. During this phase, I'm able to study value, study color and temperature, and to move fairly quickly. In my final layers, after I've blended with mineral spirits, if that's something I'm planning on doing, I then am able to really study the texture, the contour, the volume, and the very specific modulations and changes in color. When you're building up your colored pencil piece in layers, you can use a variety of different colored pencils to give you different effects. I often will start with my DERWENT LIGHTFAST colored pencils because they are sort of a hybrid between an oil-based and a wax-based colored pencil. They hold a sharp point, but they also lay down a medium amount of colored pencil. POLYCHROMOS pencils, which are much oilier than the DERWENT LIGHTFAST, are also great for laying down a light layer of color. You can use luminance colored pencils though for your base layer, and you'll see throughout this that I mix in luminance colored pencils throughout my base layer. They are laying down a little bit more color and a little bit more material, but sometimes the luminance colored pencil has the color that I want or that I need. And sometimes I honestly just grab the pencil that is the closest to me and has the sharpest point. So there can be tons of different reasons for using different pencils throughout your piece. But for this piece, I'm using a combination of DERWENT LIGHTFAST colored pencils, CARAN Luminance colored pencils, and a few POLYCHROMOS and PABLO pencils. And if you're interested in purchasing new pencils, you can find links to all the pencils that I mentioned down in the notes below. Using my links is a great way to support the channel because I get a small commission on your purchase at no additional cost to you. Thanks so much. Once you've built up a moderate amount of colored pencil in your base layer, you can come in and blend with an odorless mineral spirit. I like to use Neutral Thin by Eco House and GAMSOL by GAMBLIN. Both of these products are really safe and work really well. They're specifically designed to be used by artists for fine art. If you want to learn more about blending with solvent, definitely make sure that you check out my solvent video, which answers 10 of the biggest questions that people have with solvent and teaches you how to use this product safely. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of working with solvent in this video, but when you're working with light value colored pencils like a light pink flower or a yellow or a cream, it's really important to make sure that you build up enough material on your paper. It can be really tempting with a light pink flower like this to leave the lighter areas just the white of the paper and have the white value of the paper coming through. But if you do this, there isn't anything for the solvent to activate or to mix with. And sometimes this can lead to adding a really weird oil stain on your paper or mixing the colors unevenly. So in those areas that don't have a lot of value, the lightest areas in your composition, make sure that you lay down something. I was typically laying down a salmon color, a light cream, or even straight white, just so that there was material on my paper before I blended with solvent. Have you learned something new in this video or found something really interesting? If so, I'd love it if you hit that thumbs up button. It's a great way to support the channel, and all it takes is one teeny tiny little click. Thanks so much. When you're building up your piece with layers, at a certain point, you are going to transition from initial impression colors to more specific colors. And the more specific colors that you're using towards the final stages of your drawing need to have accurate value. If you don't already know, value refers to the lightness or the darkness of a color. And when we're discussing pink specifically, pink is going to look different in the shadows than it does in the areas that are being hit by light. When you take a pink object and you turn it away from its light source, so those pinks that are in the shadow areas, they're not going to look like a hot, bright pink anymore. Instead, they're going to be a darker, deeper pink. And these are often colors that we refer to as burgundy or red violet, or possibly even a deep red brown, depending on the temperature and the type of pink that we're working with. It is incredibly important that you keep value in mind as you're working on your drawing, because this is one of the key ways that we're able to add volume and depth. And if you don't nail the value, your drawing is going to look really flat. Let's zoom out a little bit and discuss mistake number 6, which is not carefully considering the other colors in your composition. And for this pink flower piece, I'm going to specifically be talking about the background. When you're selecting a background color that's different from your photo reference, you really need to make sure that this color is picked intentionally. For this photo reference, I decided to get rid of most of the green in the background and to just put a color field behind it. I popped my photo reference into Photoshop and I tested out different background colors. I went one step further and I actually put several of my favorite options up on YouTube in a community poll. And I want to thank you all so much for voting on your favorite image. This was the community's favorite image and I actually didn't pick it. I think that it looks really nice and I totally get why this one got so many votes. But when I thought about my goals and that I wanted a piece to really feel like it belonged with this one, I felt that a more harmonious, more analogous color scheme would work best. So I picked colors that were closer to the pink, reds, violets, bright fuchsias, and I used these in kind of a gradient in the background. I felt that this created a more romantic, emotional feeling that felt like it all belonged together rather than a really contrasting background. But I really want to hear what you think. Do you think that I made the right choice? Would you have made a different choice? Let me know down in the comments below. Mistake number 7 is selecting a bad photo reference. And I mention bad photo references in just about every one of my mistake videos. And that's because it can make such a big difference. But let's talk specifically about what could make a bad photo reference if you're drawing a pink subject, particularly a pink flower. The first thing that I want you to think about is what colors do you have available in your colored pencil set? If you're working with a 12 set or a 24 set of colored pencils, there are going to be some colors that you just can't mix. The first time that I drew pink flowers, I actually went to dickblick.com and ordered a bunch of new colored pencils because the current set of pencils that I had available just didn't cut it. But if you do have a more limited supply, I'd highly recommend starting with maybe a red or a more muted pink than a bright fuchsia like I'm working on here. Another thing that can make a really bad photo reference is if part or all of the photo is out of focus. This particular photo has some really cool elements. I love the raindrops hitting this petal, but part of the flower is out of focus, and that is just going to be too big of a hurdle to deal with. This photo is so awesome. I love all of those intricate folds and how this flower is really unique, but this isn't an ideal choice because it doesn't have a very clear light source. I probably took this photo on a cloudy day and there just isn't a very clear modeling of shadow wrapping around the petals. And for me, that's going to make it harder to illustrate. And finally, this photo reference is bad because the pink is actually getting blown out. The light is too intense, my camera settings are off, and it's just not giving me a very nice variety of pinks or a very clear modeling of the pinks on the form. I've alluded to this one a bit already, but mistake number 8 is not having or using the right colors. Pink subjects, more than any other colored subject, require specific pencils. So for example, if I am drawing a yellow flower, I likely have several yellows in a basic set of colored pencils that will work and will help me do that. I've got a bright yellow, an ochre color, and then I might have some violets that will help me neutralize that. But in your standard 12, 24, and even 36 count sets, there often isn't a single pink or light lavender color available. You often get these really bright, vibrant pinks and purples by investing in larger sets or purchasing colored pencils open stock. Another thing that I've run into with pink colored pencils is there are a ton of pigments that are not light fast. So even in the POLYCHROMOS set, which is typically a very light fast set, the pink colored pencils are the least light fast pigments. And the assumption that I'm making from this information is that it is a lot more difficult or more expensive to make light fast pink colors. In a Prismacolor set where we're not necessarily investing in pencils because they're light fast, you can get so many bright pinks, but finding light fast pinks, that's a whole nother story. So when you invest in pink colored pencils, look carefully at the light fast rating, look at the quality of the pencil, and look for specific pigments that are going to help you render the specific pink subject in front of you. I want to share a few of my favorite colors before we pop over to mistake number 9. I make sure that all of my pencils are a 6 or higher on the Blue Wool scale, which is a 1 to 8 scale. So all of these colors are going to be fairly light fast. The color that I'm using right here is Fuchsia. It's a POLYCHROMOS colored pencil, and it is probably the pencil I use the most throughout this entire piece. This red color is called Scarlet, and you wouldn't necessarily think there would be a whole lot of red in a bright pink flower, but I definitely use that to press some of my pinks further or to add some more intensity. This colored pencil is called Crimson, and it's not exactly what you'd expect a crimson colored pencil to look like. It's more of a red violet. It's bright, it's vibrant, and I used it a lot in the shadow areas on this piece and also a lot in the background. This Derwent Lightfast pencil is Crimson. I love this pencil. It's great in florals, but also in a ton of other subjects. And this is the POLYCHROMOS version of Magenta. It's a little darker, a little richer, and I use it to push the shadows back while also maintaining the warmth. Having a few warm, dark colors is so important regardless of your subject matter. This is one of my favorite colored pencils in the Luminance colored pencil line. It's called Manganese Violet. It's this light lavender color. It's perfect for adding shadows on white areas, and I use it a ton in portraits as well. There's one other color that's really similar to this in the Luminance set, and it's called Ultramarine Pink. It's a little bit warmer, and it's also just amazing. I specifically acquired this pencil for a drawing of pink flowers that I did several years ago. It's a Pablo pencil by CARAN, which is CARAN version of an oil-based colored pencil and is very similar to the POLYCHROMOS colored pencils. However, this color is a little unique and isn't one that I saw in the POLYCHROMOS line, and it's called Purplish Red. I used a variety of white pencils throughout this piece, but this one is the Derwent Drawing Chinese White, and it is the waxiest, most opaque white that I use for the whole drawing. I use this pencil to blend out areas that need a little extra love and attention. I can burnish with lots of pressure, press the pigments together, and it's just, oh my gosh, it's amazing. You have to try it. Mistake number 9 is having bad blending technique. And rather than describe to you all the ways that I feel blending can go wrong, I'm going to show you how I blend my colors together, which is a strategy that I invite you to practice and use in your drawings. First and foremost, I look for shapes, and here I'm mapping in a shape with the Fuchsia pencil, but I'm keeping the edges really soft so that they can seamlessly transition into other colors. I'm constantly bouncing in between the pink and other colors so that I can really get a good balance. Here with the Manganese Violet, I am deepening the white area of that flower, which is actually in shadow, and I'm cooling that area down so that it recedes into the center of the flower rather than jumping out at us like I want the white parts of the petals that are in the light doing. Once I've mapped in all of my color and I've gone back and forth and been really careful with the modulation, I will come over the top with a light value color, often a white, a cream, or even a super, super light pink, and I'll burnish it out to really blend and mix those colors together. Last but certainly not least is mistake number 10, which is not taking the time to pay attention to your finishing details. And this is something that can be a mistake for any piece, regardless of the predominant color that you're using. Once you feel like you have a pretty good handle on everything that's going on in the piece, it's time to take a step back and make sure it's working together as a whole. Right now, I am burnishing over the background to unify by and make the red flower in the top right corner start to recede and to blend into the background. And I made that decision because I really wanted it to soften compared to the crisp edges of the main flowers in the foreground. I'm also going over the other petal or kind of dried up flower, and I'm using colored pencils to glaze that back. Now in my photo reference, it's almost white, but it was taking too much attention away from the flowers. So I made an artistic decision and I decided to darken the value. It's important to make decisions like an artist and not like a computer that blindly follows the photograph. For this piece, I started with the bigger moves like toning the background and glazing over that lighter petal. But then I started coming into smaller moves. I'm looking at the edges of the flowers and making sure that the edges that I want to pop. And usually I'm playing around with value contrast in those areas. There are also some petals that I want a little softer and I want them to bleed into the background a little bit more. I'm also paying attention to the value in the flower. Are the light areas light enough? Are the dark areas dark enough? Are there any areas that might need more pigment in them because the grain of the paper is coming through more than I want it to? There are so many different questions to ask and decisions to make in these final stages, and I really want you to take the time to do this, because if you just go from the top left corner to the bottom right corner and then you're done, you're missing the opportunity of actually making art. Instead, you're just being a photocopier or a technician. Looking at the piece holistically, making decisions to make it better is what separates you from a machine. If you have a difficult time finding areas in your drawing to improve or knowing what you should do to just really finish it off, I recommend asking a friend, a family member, or tossing it up in a Facebook group. Even if your friends and family don't know a lot about art, they can still notice when something is really good or if something is confusing and doesn't make sense. And they're often better at finding these issues than you are because you've been staring at it for the last several hours. I hope you've really learned a lot throughout this video and that you are excited and encouraged to start your next drawing of something pink. I would love to see what you create, so be sure to tag me on Instagram, or you can submit your artwork into my Facebook critique group. This pink video has been one in a series of videos that I've done where I've really looked closely at individual colors, and you can check out the other videos in that series right here. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video all the way till the end. Now go have a curious and creative rest of your day. Bye!